The aftershocks of the release of the Kelly tapes, a retired four-star general, a life of sacrifice and service, a Gold Star father, a former chief of staff to Donald Trump, going on the record and on tape, importantly, saying that Donald Trump, in his view, meets the technical and practical definition of a fascist. General Kelly also recounting the numerous times he mentioned his admiration for Hitler and Hitler's generals to John Kelly. Today, the question everyone has to grapple with, what would it mean to have someone like that as our commander-in-chief? And what would it mean, more importantly, for those serving in the United States military? And how could a Hitler-admiring fascist, in the words of John Kelly, not somehow erase the significance of the sacrifices made to save the world from Hitler and fascism during World War II? Here's how past American presidents of both parties talk about Hitler and the fight against fascism.
We are determined, with our noble allies here, that Europe's freedom will never again be endangered. We now have about 200,000 Americans, fighting men in Europe, to make sure that this threat is never before us again.
You all knew that some things are worth dying for. One's country is worth dying for, and democracy is worth dying for, because it's the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man.
The most difficult days of your lives brought us 50 years of freedom. You did your job. Now we must do ours. Let us begin by teaching our young people about the villainy that started this war and the valor that ended it.
It is a strange turn of history that called on young men from the prairie towns and city streets of America to cross an ocean and throw back the marching mechanized evils of fascism. And those young men did it. You did it.
Freedom is worth it. Democracy is worth it. America is worth it. The world is worth it. Then, now, and always.
And here's how Donald Trump views fascism and Hitler, in the words of someone who served his country in uniform for decades and also served as the longest chief of staff to Donald Trump.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good. Looking at the definition of fascism, it's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
That's where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Tim Miller's here. He's the host of the Bulwark podcast and former RNC spokesman. Also joining us, retired four-star general, MSNBC military analyst Barry McCaffrey's here. Democratic strategist and president of Brilliant Corners Research, Cornell Belcher's back. And with me at the table for the hour, the host of the Fast Politics podcast and special correspondent for Vanity Fair, Molly Jong-Fast is here. General McCaffrey, I start with you. It's not just that Trump is now described as a fascist by three of the most senior generals who've ever served the country and certainly who've ever been a part of the modern political conversation because of the choices they made to serve, in John Kelly's case, as chief of staff, and Secretary Mattis's case as Secretary of Defense. But by all three of them describing Donald Trump as a fascist, Generals Milley and Mattis to author Bob Woodward, and John Kelly in his own words to Mike Schmidt of the New York Times, the country has to grapple with what that means, not just in 14 days, but about our history. We are a country that describes and agrees that the greatest generation is the generation that fought fascism, is the generation that fought Hitler, who Donald Trump says, quote, did a lot of good things too. How do we do that?
It's very difficult to address this issue rationally. It's so preposterous. Hitler and his generals murdered 21 million people, the mentally ill, the gypsy population, 6 million Jews. They killed the sick, the elderly, the prisoners of war. They devastated Europe from the Ural Mountains all the way to the English Channel. We had 400,000 plus U.S. troops killed during that conflict. My dad served, all three of my uncles. The nation came together. We put 16 million men and women into uniform to try and roll back this evil. It's simply beyond belief that Trump could take this stance. And by the way, Kelly, I've known for decades. He's one of the finest public servants, Marine generals we've ever produced. Man of rock-like integrity. Trump then responds to him that he's a lowlife and a degenerate. Who talks like that? This guy is a basic threat to the security of the United States and to our Constitution.
General McCaffrey, how do you convey how un-American it is to believe that Hitler did good things when so many American families' proudest legacy is what you just described, that someone in their family, a father, a grandfather, an uncle, served in World War II to fight Hitler and fascism?
Well, that's right. And, you know, Hitler did have the loyalty of generals, and they marched right over the cliff together. The worst impact on Germany from Hitler was the devastation of their own country. By the end of the war, it was a rubble pile. 1 out of 2 German homes was destroyed. He devastated his own people. I don't think you can address this coming at it from a rational perspective. I think Mr. Trump, by the way, that when he lost the last election and he moved a retired lieutenant colonel out of the White House and put him in the Pentagon, at the time I was on air on NBC saying this guy is arranging a coup against the United States government. He had an acting Homeland Security, an acting Secretary of Defense. He tried to fire the CIA director. He had an acting Department of Homeland Security. He was setting up a third world coup against the Constitution. This time, he's telling us in advance he's going to eliminate the deep state. He's going to deport 25 million people using the armed forces. The language, the actions of political rhetoric is 1930s Germany. We have been told directly, we got to wake up. This is not hyperbole. This isn't entertainment value. This guy is a fundamental threat to our way of life.
Cornell, let me show you how Vice President Kamala Harris dealt with the tapes and the revelation last night at a town hall over at CNN. First, on the question of whether Trump is a fascist.
Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted. Again, look at their careers. These are not people, with the exception, I think, of only Mike Pence. These were not politicians. These are career people who have served in the highest roles in national security, who have served as generals in our military, who are highly respected. Talking about the person who would be commander-in-chief.
So is he a fascist is a question that must now be asked of every person, man and woman, in elected office, because it's a binary answer. Yes, and you agree with General Kelly, who's on tape saying so, Jim Mattis, and Mark Milley, who said he was fascist to the core. And it's a yes or no question that everyone serving in American government and aspiring to American politics has to now answer.
Listen, Nicolle, you and I have been working in politics a long time, right? This is crazy uncharted waters, right? We can have policy discussions at the national level for candidates about taxes, but this is where we're literally having a conversation about whether or not someone who might be president of the United States is a fascist. First, I want to say, actually, I think we still owe a royal of thank you to General Kelly and those other generals who are still on duty, because I still see this as General Kelly and those other generals, they're still protecting America, right? This isn't about partisanship. They have an oath to this country and to the Constitution, and thank God for them that they still see that they're standing on duty for this country and trying to protect this country. So I'm very thankful that they came out, that General Kelly came out and he's putting this forward in a close. My question, I actually want to sort of throw the question back to you, Nicolle, is how much of this conversation about fascism is going to matter to that 47-48% of Trump voters that we know voted for him 2 times before, right? How many of those voters are going to move or even understand what fascism is or the threat that fascism presents to their freedoms? I mean, this is uncharted waters where we're having a conversation. We've got to explain to American people, especially a lot of young people, what the threat of fascism is and how that could impact their lives.